I mean, one thing about math, I'll just park that question for a minute and come back to it. But one thing about math is that no matter what stages you're doing, I always think it is a great exercise in logical thinking. And I think that's the beauty of math. And no matter what stage you're using it and what level that you're going to study it to, all of the time you're using it is developing your ability to think logically.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back today for day 2 of my conversation with Pat Murray. He is the founder of CTCMath, and well, you guys already know because you've heard us talk about them for so long. They are our favorite math curriculum. I'm so thankful for CTCMath, teaching math to my kids, because as you know, I do not like teaching math. And so this has been really a fun conversation. And I told Pat that this is going to be kind of funny. I said, I'm so glad you have an engaging personality because you never know when you talk to someone who is a math person, though I don't know why I would doubt that because as I've told you, my bestie, Crystal, she's got one of the best personalities of anyone on the planet, and she's a math geek. So I guess lots of math people really do have fun personalities and are really fun to talk to. I think maybe because I think math is boring, that sometimes I think math people will be boring, but that's not necessarily true, right? I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, most of the math people I know are really great people and really fun. So forget that idea. Math people are fun and they have lots of fun with numbers. So we're going to talk more about it today. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for a really good, solid Christian biblical worldview curriculum for your kids for any subject, history, science, language arts, whatever, look at BJU Press Homeschool. They have everything for every grade, every subject, and they have lots of different ways to teach your kids and to help them engage in what it is that they're learning. So check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. And you can also call them and talk to one of their consultants if you're just not sure what is best for your family. Call them up and they'll walk you through the whole process. bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Pat, thank you so much for coming back. And again, I just want to say thank you. I said this in the first episode, but I truly want to tell you how much we appreciate you here at the Schoolhouse Rocked ministry. You not only support and sponsor the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast, but you have also sponsored our Homeschool Insights podcast, which is our sister podcast. If you guys haven't listened to that, that is, it goes 5 days a week, and it's just 7 to 10 minutes of homeschool encouragement. It's just like power snippets of encouragement for you as homeschool parents. And that is sponsored solely by CTCMath. And so we're so grateful for that. And they've sponsored our online conferences. I mean, they've just been so encouraging, and basically anything that we want to do, they say, how can we help? How can we help support you? How can we support your audience? How can we help the homeschool community to grow? And so we are grateful for you, Pat, and for your team and everything that you do all the way from Sydney, Australia.
Thank you.
What a fun place to live. It looks beautiful in pictures. I haven't been there yet, but one of these days, perhaps I will. So I want to talk a little bit more about math because apparently this is a fun thing to talk about. And I want to talk about math facts because I know this is maybe somewhat controversial today, more so than it used to be many years ago. And I feel like I fall somewhere in the middle of this controversy, in that back in the olden days when I was in school, we had to learn all of our math facts. We had to learn our multiplication, addition, subtraction, not so much division. I don't remember learning division facts, though I know some do, but especially multiplication facts. That was a big thing. Well, now today, I've heard a lot of people say, well, our kids have access to calculators because they have phones. And by the time they get into their teen years and adult years, they're all carrying calculators in their pockets. And so is there really a need, as our world has changed with access to be able to do math quickly? What are your thoughts on teaching math facts to our kids? Is that as necessary today as it used to be? And I would just love to know kind of where you fall in that controversy of teaching math facts.
Yeah, that's a great question because that does puzzle a lot of people because I hear, different contrasting views on it. So I have always thought, and it has never changed actually, because I've done a lot of research as well, that the ability to recall math facts quickly is absolutely essential. It's just It's not even non-negotiable. It's a bit like if we think of a basketball player, you might have played basketball, or you certainly watched some basketball, and you'll see the guys or girls, they're dribbling up the court and so on, and they're looking at, the strategy. Where am I going to throw this ball? They're not concentrating on the dribbling. If you think of their dribbling, that's subconscious, okay? But when they learned dribbling way back when they were, 5 or 6 year old, that's all they were concentrating on. How do you dribble this ball without losing it? Or okay, but they build up those things that becomes eventually, by subconscious, they're dribbling, but their focus is on strategy. Where are they throwing the ball to a teammate? Well, who's open? Where can they score some points? And it's a bit like, your math facts, your times tables, your multiplication tables, all of that stuff. As your child gets a bit older, as their math works gets a bit harder, you don't want them wasting any sort of mental ability thinking about, 5 times 7, what's 5 times 7? All of a sudden, they're thinking about that, they're wasting, their mental energy on that, where really that should just be instant so they can actually solve the bigger problem, right? Sure. And even though they've got calculators and so on these days, they, to train for the child's brain to be trained in instant recall is so important, because you just don't want to waste any energy on that and those sort of things. So when you get to algebra, for example, a good example is when they do what's called factorization. And a factorization you've got what's called a quadratic equation. Now, I'm not going to get too nerdy in math, but basically one of the things might say you've got a number like it'd be 24, and you've got to think of two numbers that multiply to be 24, and they might add to be 11, okay? So you don't, and that's just part of a step in algebra. You've got to factorize that. So you don't want to look at 24 and go through, okay, how do you get 24? Well, I know like 2 times 12 is 24, but that doesn't add up to 11, or does it add up to 11? Let me check. You don't want to you just want instant recall. So you want to know, and I'm sure everyone at home is thinking, 24. Yep, I know it's 8 times 3, and that out to 11. So that's the combination. But you just, those sort of things, I just want to be an instant recall. So I think one of the things, and why it sort of gathered a little bit of momentum, why to say that times table isn't needed, or all those facts, is because the argument was, which to my mind is a pretty crazy argument, that it was going to force your child into learning these things in a very robotic sort of way, and you're sort of dampening down their creativity.
Oh, goodness.
And in fact, the reverse is true. So by them being able to learn them instantly, to know that, then they can be creative. Like your friend who loves doing all the maths puzzle and that, but they've got that ability to do that. And another good parallel I often use is like a Rubik's Cube, and this is more so instruction, just good instruction. Like if you give a child a Rubik's Cube, it's interesting, and then they'll play with a while, and then it becomes frustrating because it is. I mean, they're pretty tough to do. But there are actually some great. In my day, when I was back in grade 8, I found a book. A friend of mine had a book, a Rubik's Cube book, and I was able to solve it. I really got a lot of enjoyment because I was able to follow the steps. I taught myself from this book. And now these days, of course, there's some great YouTube videos on how to do a Rubik's Cube. But if your child learns how to do a Rubik's Cube, then there's a lot of enjoyment. All right, they've been shown all the steps. They haven't discovered all the steps themselves. They've been shown. They might have mucked around a little bit and discovered some steps, but really they've been taught. And once they're taught, then they get a lot of enjoyment showing their friends or family, look how fast I can do this Rubik's Cube. Whereas if they're not taught, and this is, I guess, more so explicit teaching, which is I'm a big advocate for, if they're not taught explicitly, then they make some sort of progress, but it's probably then frustrating, and they'll put that Rubik's Cube away. Much like, they'll put their math away if they're not taught properly. They're sort of asked to fend for themselves. So I guess it's a bit of a long-winded question.
Yeah,
a long question answer to say, yes, the math facts are really important. And I really encourage you to, at home, if you've heard that, there maybe it's maybe good, maybe bad, think, no, it is good. You got to know.
It is good. Okay. Pat Murray says it is good in his Australian accent. So yes, it is a good thing. And it's funny that you talk about the Rubik's Cube in that way, because the two people in our house who are really good at math, my husband and my youngest daughter, they both love the Rubik's Cube, and they can solve it in minutes. Or I mean, my husband can do it in less than a minute. and we'll scramble it all up, but he's learned the algorithm to it and figured out how to do it. And he taught it to my daughter, and they both love math. Like, it just makes sense to their brain. My other daughter and I were like, no, just throw it across the room. I can't even stand trying to solve it because it frustrates me beyond belief. And so I have no desire whatsoever to try to figure it out. But I do want to talk a little bit about the best way to teach math facts, but we're going to take a break first. We'll be right back. We want to thank all of our sponsors for making this show possible: BJU Press Homeschool, CTCMath, Apologia, and IEW. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Visit the show notes for links to these great companies and thank them for supporting the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. We are back with Pat. What is the best way? So we've established that, yes, math facts are important for kids to know. What is the best way that you have found to teach our kids math facts? Because I know there's lots of different methods for doing that. Have you found one specific way, or maybe a few ways?
Well, I'll give you some specifics, but then I'll broaden it out a bit. But I've always found, and I guess whether it's a bias because this is how I learned it, but to actually learn it by a little bit of a jingle and a little bit of a rhyme, or and just be able to say it over and over again in a fun sort of way, and just keep on saying that to start with. And then, like, having a sheet of questions, and then just seeing, okay, question, answer really fast. And you might have 50 to 100 like that. So I think, that sort of thing. And I'm a big advocate for pen and paper, if I haven't mentioned it earlier, but really it's important. I mean, our program is computer-based,
sure,
but we're always encouraging questions that, I mean, some of them are instant recall, and I guess that's a little bit what we're talking now, but most questions need a few steps of working. So we always have the pen and paper next to us while we're working it out. Yeah. So, but the math facts, if you can learn something that is sort of a fun jingle or some sort of rhyming way to learn it, and then have practice on it. I mean, we've built our program so that there's ability. We have our what's called speed skills. So it gives a student an opportunity to, and they're typing these ones in because they're just instant recall facts. So that sort of thing, the kids respond to that well. There's a lot of stuff online that, like, free games. I mean, I've found some over the years are really good, and some are not so good. But there's so many. I mean, we've deliberately haven't incorporated games so much in our program because we didn't want to go down that track of gamey. But in saying that, there are some good resources online that are free games, which concentrate on times tables or addition facts or subtraction facts. So, and just one good website comes to mind is Cool Math Games. Math Games or Math Cool Games. I'm pretty sure it's Cool Math Games. And
I think so.
Yeah, that's a good website, just that we're not affiliated with or anything, but that's one I've seen that I've checked some things out. I think, they're pretty good. So I think that would be a good way of doing it, but it is really important that they nail those math facts. Yeah.
It's funny you talk about jingles, because I remember specifically when I was a kid, in probably third grade is when I learned my math facts, and I had headphones on, and we must have had it had to have been a cassette tape, because CDs weren't even invented back then.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think it was a cassette tape, and I would pop it in, and it would go through all of the multiplication facts. And I remember it'd be, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6. And this lady over and over again would just repeat them. And that's how I learned my multiplication facts. And for my girls, I had a sweet friend who actually came up with these fun little songs that she made up herself, and she sent them to me. And so that's how my girls practiced their facts as well. And so it really does. But I think also for the child who's maybe more of a visual learner is if they're hearing it and seeing it. So having all of those facts printed out on a piece of paper, which you can find anywhere on the internet, you can just download those in an instant. Having them look at the multiplication facts as they're listening to them, so they're getting them in their ears and through their eyes at the same time, is a good way for them to hear.
I think so. And I find it fascinating, Yvette, that you actually still remember that jingle.
Exactly as it was.
It is extraordinary. Yeah. So they do work. Once they're in there, they never leave you.
Right. No, they never do. I want to talk a little bit about, like, when do we start teaching math, like the formal instruction of math? Because this is a question that I see often on social media is these moms will jump on and they're often first-time homeschool moms, and they'll say, I've got a kindergartner. What math program do I use for them? And they think that they need to cover all of the subjects starting in kindergarten. And maybe their child, some kids as young as 3 years old are interested in numbers and math and things like that. But at what age and grade level, generally, do you suggest introducing a formal math curriculum to children?
That's a good question. We probably don't have a sort of a hard and fast rule on that one in terms of just probably the parent being the best judge of where their child's at. I mean, in terms of when they're really young and as they're approaching, being 4 or 5 years old, and look, I think it's really up to the parent to sort of maybe try a few things out and see what sort of response the child has, because it'll be, some kids will be really excited about doing stuff and others not so at that stage. So I wouldn't push it. I really not sure if I'm a great one at sort of giving advice about really when to start on that one. But I think as the parent you'll see how they respond. So.
At what level does CTCMath start?
Well, we start at grade 1. We do have a kindy program as well. So kindy grade 1, and but a lot of that stuff is stuff that you might have already done at home. It's probably not sort of groundbreaking sort of information there, but it's stuff that they would probably see it on TV as well, like counting this and colours and all that sort of stuff. But it gives the kids a bit of an introduction. In math, and then probably once you get to, I suppose, grade 1, I sort of think would be, when we're sort of doing stuff, introducing concepts that they won't generally just sort of seen by osmosis, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many opportunities when our kids are little, and we take those opportunities oftentimes without even realizing that we're teaching math technically. When your kid sits down to play with their blocks, I think it's natural for most moms when they sit down to play with their kids to say, oh, there's 3 blocks here and 2 blocks here. If we put them together, how many blocks do we have?
Yep, exactly.
That is the best way to start introducing math concepts to kids. If we're going to buy 4 apples and give 2 away to our neighbor, how many do we have? I mean, these are simple things that very small children can understand, but they're starting to understand those math concepts. Let me ask you another question in regards to how much time is spent on math each day. And obviously this is going to totally depend on the level of math, but what would you say is the least amount of time? And what would you say is the most amount of time that our kids should be spending on a math lesson so that their brains are grasping the concepts that are necessary, but not feeling completely overwhelmed and overburdened by learning too much?
I think for the younger kids, like if they're like very young, grade 1, grade 2, and then moving up to grade 6, it'll vary a bit. But I'd sort of 20 minutes of math would be pretty good. Once they hit to grade 6, maybe about 30 minutes of math, 35 at a time. And that would give them, enough time to really get a lot of, enjoyment might not be the right word, but get a lot of benefit from a lesson.
Sure.
Once they hit high school, a 45-minute lesson is probably a good thing to be aiming for, and that includes the instruction plus what they're practicing, they're practicing on. So instruction plus practice, 45-minute block, they can get a lot out of that if they're instructed well.
Yeah. I think that's about the amount of time that my high schooler spends on math, and then my 7th grader, she probably spends about 30 minutes. So I think that's probably right in line with what you're saying as they're practicing their math facts and those different concepts and stuff. Because after about 45 minutes, I feel like, my daughter's just like, I cannot do another minute of this. This is going to make my brain explode. All right, let me ask you one more question. So as we're thinking about life, and okay, do not be offended by this, Mr. Pat Murray.
Okay, I'll try not to be.
But as we think through math, I know for myself and for my oldest daughter, she came to me at one point and she was like, Mom, I am never going to use this algebra that I'm learning in my life. And I'm like, yeah, I've never done that kind of algebra as an adult. At what point, obviously some kids will move on to careers where they're going to need further math lessons. They're going to need calculus, and I want them to have calculus or whatever it is that they're doing. What's necessary for most humans? I guess the way I want to ask this is, what is the highest level of math that you think most people need in order to be able to succeed in life without the frustration of not knowing how to do certain math problems?
That's a great question, because, you're right. I mean, your child, might come up and say, this trigonometry question, right, where am I ever going to use it? And the reality is they're not, right? So that's, you have to understand that's true, right? So sure. If you're thinking they're not going to use that, you're right. So I think, one thing about math, I'll just park that question for a minute and come back to it. But one thing about math is that no matter what stages you're doing, I always think it is a great exercise in logical thinking. And I think that's the beauty of math, and no matter what stage you're using it and what level that you're going to study it to, all of the time you're using it is developing your ability to think logically. So that's, I think, the most important thing about math. So your ability to think logically. So what level that you get to, well, one of the crazy things about any math curriculum is that probably the most important thing that all kids as they grow up into adults need is a high level of financial literacy. And unfortunately, once I say it's unfortunate, is that most curriculums don't have that. And ours included. We haven't done a big focus on financial literacy because we've basically focused on what the kids are expected to learn as part of their curriculum. And so, that's a project that we'd like to do down the track. Is because that's the biggest thing that I think a lot of students have as they go into progress into adulthood. They don't understand the things like if you're offered a credit card at 18, and I know there's rules against this now, or hopefully there are, but in some places I know, and if I bring it back to one of my kids, right, she doesn't mind me talking about this because it's but she struggled because as an 18-year-old she was offered a credit card, and the banks knew her details because she was 18, so she got this credit card and it was $500 limit, and this is $500 free money. Oh, great! Right. And that's what they think, it's free money. They think they have to pay it back, and then so she would have spent that $500 in an instant, and then a few months later, she gets another letter saying, "Oh, you're such a good customer. You've been keeping up with your payments. We're going to increase it to $3,000." Oh boy! And anyway, so eventually, 12 months later, she got into a debt of nearly $8,000 because this is just what happened. So and then to explain, well, $8,000, and I think at that time was probably 20% interest. That's the sort of math you want your kids to know. 20% of $8,000. That's $1,600 that you're paying just in interest to the bank, plus all the rest. So, these sort of things, if they're wary, I really think the financial side of things, if they're wary of the pitfalls, if they, what they can fall into. But in terms of trigonometry, algebra, all of that sort of stuff, wow, that's a good question. It's not, I always just think, no matter what level you're doing, it is, your logical thinking is being improved. Yeah, so, I'm not sure that answered your question, Yvette.
Yeah, no, it did. And it absolutely is about logical thinking, problem solving, all of those things. I think that's such an important part of the development of our kids, is to be able to think through those things and be able to solve these problems and push themselves to do something that's really hard. We live in a world where we want things to be easy, and sometimes things are not easy, and we need to teach our kids to just push through the pain and do the math. And, we all had to do it to graduate. They have to do it to graduate as well. And they're going to survive it, especially with CTCMath on their side and teaching it to our kids for us. So thank you so much for being with me again today. We are going to come back tomorrow and talk more with Pat. And tomorrow I want to talk more about family, actually. I want to talk about his kids and what he's learned as a parent and now as a grandparent, and just how he has changed maybe his perspective on parenting and family and all those things. So we will be back tomorrow to talk about those things. Again, if you want to learn more about CTCMath, visit their website at ctcmath.com, and maybe shoot them an email and just say to them, hey, thanks for sponsoring and supporting the Schoolhouse Rocked ministry, because like I said, without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And without you, our listeners, contributing financially as well, we would not be able to do what it is that we're doing. And so we are so thankful for CTC, and we are so thankful for you. Make sure you stay tuned to the very end to hear a clip of what's coming up next on the podcast. And you can find everything about the Schoolhouse Rocked ministry on our website, schoolhouserocked.com. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
A mom said to me one time, "Aren't you worried about sheltering your children?" And I said to her, "We care more about sheltering tomato plants in the culture right now than we do about our precious children." And so if someone wants to accuse me of sheltering my children, my answer is always absolutely yes. I will shelter my child until I know my child can stand up against the elements of the culture so that they can grow to maturity. And we slowly begin to remove the shelter from around them as we see that they are mature and that they understand the battle lines around them and can engage the culture from a position of strength rather than weakness.
I think I was a bit probably too strict when they were sort of going through their teens, and then because they're all going to rebel, right? So some are more rebellious than others, and I think when you do see your kids starting to rebel, particularly if it's the oldest kids, or you do worry. You think, oh, gee, what have I done? And what could I do better? And all of these things sort of go through your mind. But what we've found is really just the stages that kids go through. And while it's not pleasant, when they go through those rebellious stages, it is great seeing them come out the other side. But while they're in it, if you can sort of have the mentality, which I do now, is that, this time will pass.